While case reports are a valuable contribution to the literature, it must be kept in mind that they have certain limitations. The most obvious one is that the management of chiropractic patients occurs primarily in an uncontrolled environment. So there are many confounding factors that occur as a part of the patient's everyday life that may affect their response to care. The clinical results observed may therefore not be due to the care provided at all. It may be that the patient takes drugs or changes their diet or changes the way they work or gets married or gets divorced, all of which could have an impact on the clinical picture seen by the chiropractor. Because of these factors, and the fact that the care provided to one patient may not produce the same effect in another patient, case reports can't be generalized beyond the context of the patient reported. So you simply cannot say that based on the observations of a single patient that any particular intervention will be effective for other similar patients. To do this, you need an experimental design like an RCT. However, you can use your case report to encourage experimental trials to be done. You should also remember that results observed in a patient may simply be due to the natural history of the condition or disorder that they present with. Many disorders get better in their own time, whether an intervention is provided or not. And some disorders go up and down through phases of exacerbation and remission. If one of these phases corresponds with the time when care is provided, it could lead to faulty assumptions about the role chiropractic care played in the patient's health status. This is true of an improvement under care as well as a worsening of the patient's condition. Due to these limitations, case reports are viewed by some as having little value from an evidence-based practice perspective. However, I like this quote from Brodell in 2000 who said, "The value of case reports, physician intuition, and serendipity is often overlooked. All science is rooted in observations, and full-time clinicians are in ideal positions to observe unusual cases, develop rational explanations for the findings, and follow progress to determine if their hypothesis appears to be valid. Therefore, the collected findings of case reports may provide bases for future research studies that will lead to evidence-based treatments." Case reports are also highly relevant to practitioners. They are real. They are a real account of patients who present to chiropractors or other healthcare practitioners, and they take anecdotal evidence to a new level. I find it far more believable when I read a case study in a peer-reviewed publication than when I hear a story from a chiropractor at a conference, for example. So if we take a quick look at the clinical evidence hierarchy, a reminder that case series and case reports, they do sit low on the clinical evidence hierarchy, which is somewhat unfortunate because it means that people often don't think that they're all that important, but they do provide a good base level of evidence for us to build on and a great deal of helpful information for chiropractors in the field. In this recent study published in Chiropractic and Manual Therapies, they reported that authors promoting chiropractic case reports described these motivations to publish that are fairly specific to the chiropractic profession. And amongst those, you'll see that you could have a focus on populations with a limited research base, such as pediatric patients and pregnant women. So having these case reports does help increase the chiropractic research database and literature. The other thing which I think is really important is case reports do help other clinicians with similar cases. Also, let's say a patient comes to see you in your practice with an unusual presentation. Even though you might have no RCTs or experimental evidence showing that chiropractic care may help them, just by sharing a case report with them may give them some hope and encourage them to get under care, which may make a big difference to their health, wellness, and quality of life. I thought it would be really interesting to share with you a couple of case reports that actually they came out of a study that I did several years ago. And in this study, it was an RCT, and I was looking at the effects of chiropractic care on sensory motor function and balance and falls in older people. And I had a very specific set of outcome measures associated with the sensory motor function. And at the time, I didn't know what sort of results I was going to get from the study. I'd spent several years working on it. It was the main study in my PhD. And as I was getting towards the end of completing the study, I didn't know if I was going to get any positive results or not. But a very interesting thing started to happen where I started to be contacted by some of the patients who were in my study who were seeing chiropractors out in the field and receiving 12 weeks of chiropractic care. And they were writing me letters saying how much the chiropractic care had impacted on their life and on their quality of life, and how they were so thankful that they were included in the study. And that really made it worthwhile to me. Whether we got the positive results that would have been great to see or not as far as the RCT went, I knew that we were making a difference to people's quality of life. And some of those patients from that study, we wrote those up as case studies with the students at the New Zealand College of Chiropractic. And this first one is called Resolution of Chronic Dysphagia in a 73-year-old female receiving chiropractic care. And this was a really interesting one. When the lady started the study, she said that for 20 years she had a chronic history of having difficulty swallowing and with choking on her food. And it had gotten to the point where she didn't really eat a lot of solid food. Most of the food that she was eating was pretty bland and soupy and just not solid. She didn't enjoy eating all that much because she couldn't swallow all that well. The really interesting thing was after just a single adjustment, that problem that she'd had for the last 20 years changed. So kind of one of those miracle cases that I would have struggled to believe it if someone had said it to me without reading the notes of the chiropractor, talking to the patient and seeing what actually happened for them. So that was a single adjustment, and that chronic dysphagia that she'd suffered for basically disappeared. And overnight, she was able to change her diet and start eating solid food. Why that happened, I have absolutely no idea. But something like that, to see that dramatic change temporally associated with the chiropractic adjustment. And again, you can't prove causality, but it was a really interesting case where a 20-year problem changed overnight after the very first adjustment they had. Very interesting case, and could be worth looking into further as far as the effects of chiropractic care on dysphagia or swallowing. In this next case, it's one that really stuck with me. This is from an 89-year-old man. And I remember when I enrolled him in my study, I went and visited him out in his house, and he was very positive. He was living independently. On the outside, he seemed to be very healthy. And then he started sharing with me his history, his background. Just the most wonderful, lovely man. And he started off by telling me about an experience he had back in World War II. I think it was something like Christmas Eve. I was in a foxhole with my best friend, and we were under an artillery attack. An artillery shell landed very close to us. It killed my friend. He died in my arms, and I had some shrapnel embedded in my shoulder, which is still there. He also talked about a significant motor vehicle accident he had in 1957, where he suffered 4 fractures in his right arm, which were managed with surgical reduction and fixation, and meant since 1957 he was unable to fully extend that elbow, and he suffered from what he termed agonizing 9 out of 10 ongoing night pain in his arm since the accident. He had another motor vehicle accident in 1962, resulted in a fracture of his C6 spinous process, causing him ongoing neck pain, again rated at a 9 out of 10, and that had remained consistent since the injury. He said that he suffered mild to moderate frontal headaches on a daily basis for as long as he could remember, and thought that these were associated with those significant traumas that he had. Over the last few years, he'd also been diagnosed as having migraine headaches. These occurred every 2 to 3 weeks and resulted in incapacitating head pain and photophobia, and he rated these 9 out of 10 as far as pain went as well. He'd just learnt to endure this chronic pain that he was in. He'd accepted that he would remain incapacitated by this pain and just put that aside. So he regarded his health as being exemplary for his age because he felt, I'm still very active. I don't take medication all that well. I just put up with this pain. I can bear it. He then got under care as a part of the study and was provided with torque release and activated methods chiropractic care. And he reported within the first week a considerable decrease in the intensity of the pain and the frequency of headaches. His arm was feeling better, his neck was feeling better, and this was almost immediately following the first adjustment, even though he'd been in this agonizing pain for must have been, 50, 60 plus years. Then over the next several weeks, he just got better and better. And it was after 6 weeks or 12 weeks, he basically reported the complete cessation of all headache and migraine symptoms, and also his arm pain had completely subsided. It was quite amazing in my mind. He actually said, "Thank you for giving me my life back." That person, he was part of a larger RCT, but that sort of information and those changes that he reported would have been lost if we hadn't written it up as a case study. And again, you can't actually claim that it was the chiropractic care that made the difference. But when you look at it, it's a history of 50, 60, 70 years of these problems, and they disappeared directly correlated with him receiving chiropractic care, which was a really cool thing and made a massive difference for his quality of life. So those are just a couple of examples of what I think are pretty cool case studies. And I find them interesting just reviewing them now, having not looked at them for a few years. Interesting to me, and they were most certainly interesting for me back when I was doing my PhD and assessing these people as a part of my PhD studies. Before moving on to the next class, let's just do some quick test questions to take a look at what we've covered so far in this class.